Hello there, and welcome to another one of my little book reviews. Today it's the turn of this little number. It's Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. So, right, I'll do the usual preamble. As we go along, I'll be popping up previous cover designs from this book. I'll be talking about it, what I liked, what I didn't like, and there will be a rating at the end if you care about such things. But first of all, let's just take a little look at this copy. This is a very recent edition of the book. And one thing I would say is that it's an okay cover, I suppose, but I think the publisher, Hodder, have probably done this to save money. It's also part of, I suppose, a rebranded series of his other works as well, whereby they take a stock image. This one is from Shutterstocks, which is actually said on the back cover, and then they've plonked on this quite interesting piece of typography over the top of it. But it must have taken someone about a couple of hours to do. I'm sure there's been far more interesting covers in the past, which we will be seeing thereafter, later on. Okay, so, right, normally I talk about the condition of the book, but this one is brand new. I've smelt it before. Yes, and it smells like a child's colouring book. Right, there we are. I've put my computer on flight mode, but the bastard is still talking to me. We can't help such things. We're dealing here, incidentally, with a mischievous AI in this book. So, right, let's get on with the premise. So, this is mostly, almost entirely set on the moon. So the moon, at some point in the history, or the imagined history, or imagined future, our past, no, it would be our current, it doesn't matter. Anyway, the moon was made into a penal colony. God damn it! And so, yes, the moon is a prison. But at some point in the future, it ceased being a prison of sorts, and the people that have been serving their time on the moon are considered free individuals. They live and work upon the moon and are not imprisoned as such. Although, of course, the problem is that if you spend any length of time on the moon, it's almost impossible for you to return to Earth and still go about your daily activities. In that regard, it's not really a death sentence, but it really means that you're never really able to return home. Anyway, the story is all told through the eyes of a chap called Manny, or Manuel. And so it's through his eyes. He's telling the story in a past tense, mostly, about the events that unfold over a period of a year or two. And so he's a mechanic or an engineer, and one of his main activities is keeping a supercomputer company, if you will, and also repairing it. Anyway, very, very quickly, this Manny discovers that the artificial intelligence has become self-aware, and it's to cut a long story short, the computer helps Manny and some of his other friends. There's a professor, a young woman called Wyoming, a number of other people, to try to overthrow the tyranny of the what is it called? The Federation. I don't know. It's an Earth government that controls the moon and keeps them under its thumb, shall we say. So it's about liberation, basically. And the computer plays a central role in helping this happen. Okay, so there we are. That's the premise. Right, so I'm going to talk about what I liked and what I found interesting about the book first of all, before I start laying into it, because it wasn't my cup of tea, shall we say. So the first thing I would say is that I really loved the computer itself, the intelligence, the artificial intelligence, who's often referred to as Mike in the book, even though he's actually called Holmes, I think, Holmes 4, something like that. But they call him Mike. And he's quite an interesting character. It's kind of like a childlike playfulness with him. I say it's a him. It could be a him or a her. They actually play around with that a little bit. Doesn't really have a gender as such, but it's obviously ultra intelligent and has kind of human tendencies, human characteristics, which I imagine it's imprinted from its interactions with Manny and later on other people within that fold. So Mike is kept secret from the vast majority of people. Only the inner circle of this attempt at overthrowing the government know that this is a computer that they're talking to. So those were another interesting aspect was how they communicate with the computer. So it's through phone lines. They can pick up a phone and the computer's going to be on the other side of it. Later on, the computer's able to manifest a kind of simulation of its personality in a human form on a screen. So these were all very interesting concepts in the 60s. I mean, now we're dealing with the rise of artificial intelligence now, where these things are becoming possible over the last couple of years. Quite amazing, really. So we're living through what Heinlein was imagining. And of course, there's all the implied that it's implied that now we could run foul of similar things, propaganda and such, that might be generated by a computer, because this is one of the weapons that they use against Earth in terms of propaganda and lots of other things that the computer helps out with. So I really love the computer. I don't know if this was before or after A Space Odyssey and HAL, that artificial intelligence, no idea, but the personality is very different. And whilst there is a suggestion that the computer could merely murder a load of people just for the fun of it, as a joke, shall I say, it never really does anything too naughty in that regard. Although there is a little taster later on of some enjoyment that it gets from destruction. But I'll leave that for you if you want to read it. Okay, another interesting aspect was, for me, was the way people live on the moon. So obviously they're not living on the surface due to radiation. So they all live in these kind of warrens, they're called. So these vast tunnels under the surface where they live and work and also farm. So they have these great big tunnels that are filled with wheat primarily, but lots of other vegetables as well. Hydroponics, I imagine, going on there, although it doesn't go into too much detail. The way they live, they're usually wearing pressure suits of one sort or another, so just in case a certain section becomes depressurized or they have to go up on the surface or things like that. So, and then the other interesting thing is that the number of men on the moon far outnumbers the number of women, perhaps due to the disparity of the number of men that end up in prison versus women, perhaps. And so that causes no end of difficulties, as you could probably imagine. If there's lots of men, lots of convicts or ex-convicts, there could be problems with women. But they've come across, I guess it's happened naturally that it's a self-regulating system. So men are very, very respectful of women to a point. So you're not allowed to touch a woman unless they give you express permission. So not even like touching their hand or whatever. Anyone that runs foul of these transgressors in this way are just booted out of the nearest airlock and instantly killed. So there's a kind of a swift justice here. There's no courts, there's no trials. So the kangaroo court mentality persists, in which if you transgress, you're just killed and no one really gives a damn about it. So there's an interesting kind of thing going on here with the people. There's also a suggestion of various ways that people live in terms of families. I can't remember what they're called now. One of them's called a line family or whatever. But basically, the long and the short of it is that it's families whereby there might be multiple husbands to just a few women, perhaps. But apparently it all goes along, polyamory, I suppose you would call it. It all works really well in the book. I'm not sure this would work very well in practice. That was another kind of interesting thing, I suppose. That's what I put there. Oh, gravity well. Yeah, so obviously there's sending things from the moon to the Earth is far easier and far cheaper than Earth sending things up to the moon. And so there's trade that's done. A lot of the wheat that's produced on the moon is shipped back to Earth. But later on, when this kind of war starts taking place, this gravity well is used as a weapon. And so the moon, the burgeoning government on the moon, once they've overthrown the government quite near the beginning, they devise a weapon whereby they take rocks from the moon, encase it in steel, and catapult it towards the Earth. And by the time it reaches the Earth, these things are moving at ballistic speeds and massive. There's a lot of mass there, and obviously it's like detonating nuclear bombs, basically. So it's an interesting thing as well for me. Okay, one other thing. So the thing is that it's humans against humans essentially, but the thing that really separates the Moonies, they're called Moonies, these people that have lived on the moon all their lives. There's the stigma of the fact that they were previously convicts, or they're children of convicts. That's one thing that separates them from Earth people. But there's also the fact that, I may have already said, the fact that if you've lived your whole life on the moon, it's like a fifth. They say it's a sixth of the gravity of the Earth. I thought it was a fifth personally, but there we are. They're unable to survive on the Earth. And this is probably quite accurate in some ways. You would lose a lot of bone density for one, although that's not mentioned. But they say it's about the strain on the heart that would, from living in that, a harder gravity environment of the Earth. So they're also separate. They're still human, but they're almost like a different species in that regard. They're no longer comparable to earthbound humans. I found that interesting as well. So it's not just the politics that set them at odds with those upon the Earth, but also physical differences and different ways of living, I suppose, that they've created for themselves. Okay, so that said, I'm going to lay into it a little bit now. So the first thing that really got in the way for me was the way Manny speaks. And so he's the narrator, so a lot of it is told through his eyes. And he has, it's not really an accent as such. I don't know what you would call this. I think he's derived from Russian speaking people. And so his English, although quite proficient, misses out various words that we would normally do in fluent English, and it's so difficult to read. I found it really annoying. I'll just read just a paragraph from the very beginning of the book, because I almost put the damn thing down after a couple of pages because I thought I'm not going to be able to deal with this. But anyway, I'm not going to do it in a Russian accent either. Okay, no, I won't. My old man taught me two things: mind own business and always cut cards. Politics never tempted me. But on Monday, the 13th of May 2075, I was in computer room of Lunar Authority Complex, visiting with computer boss Mike, while other machines whispered among themselves. Mike was not official name. I had nicknamed him for Mycroft Holmes in a story written by Dr. Watson before he founded IBM. This story character would just sit and think, and that's what Mike did. Mike was a fair dinkum-thinkum, sharpest computer you'll ever meet. So they're playing fast and loose with the language anyway. Dinkum-thinkum, what the hell's that about? There's a lot of that kind of stuff, but also, I guess what would you call it? Is missing conjunctive. Mind own business, mind my own, whatever. You know what I mean? It just really annoyed me, and for me, I used to struggle with my reading as a child, and there's an aspect of my reading that's never really improved. Of course it has. My reading has improved, but if something is not quite right, the syntax isn't quite right, I can't really deal with it. It takes me a while for my mind to get around the problem. but I got there eventually, but I still bloody hated it. Okay, and the other thing is that a lot of this story, as interesting as it is on the surface, is bloody boring. There's a lot of political. I just don't know. It's lots of political theory. It just didn't interest me at all. But even the things that might have been more interesting about targets that were going to be used to sling rocks at, that just kept going on and on and on, and I just got so bored, and it took any kind of drama out of it for me. So towards the end, I just wanted to get through it and just finish it. I won't tell you how it ends. It's kind of interesting, I suppose, and it is sad in a way as well. But if you ever read it, you'll see why, if you can bear to get through it. The problem is, I think this book is very highly regarded. I imagine, I didn't look it up, but I imagine it won an award for it. I know it's in the Masterworks collection as well. But for me, I don't see why it is there personally. As interesting as some of the ideas are, and it was written relatively well, but I don't know, I just found it boring. So anyway, right, let's give this fellow a rating. As you can imagine, it's not going to be too high. In fact, I was on the verge of giving it 3 stars, but I've settled for 2. And that's because I want to just wanted to give it the old heave-ho. Obviously, he's also, another famous book of his is Starship Troopers, upon which the film was made. I might try that one day, maybe, but I won't be in a hurry to read any more of his books, personally. What do you think? Have I got it all wrong? Let me know in the comments below if you think this is better than I'm describing it as. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll be back next week with another book review or another book haul. I've got some more books ready to get out of their various boxes. So yeah, I'll be back soon. Thank you for watching. Sorry it's been a bit rambling as usual. But there we are. I'll see you next time. Cheerio.